Um, and so thank you again, everybody who has attended. My name is Clara Shahite, and I'm going to be the moderator of today's amazing panel. And this session was hosted by NextGen. And so I think, Rachel, we would invite you to just give us a bit of an intro on what NextGen is, and then basically also give us a warm welcome, and then we will get right into the panel for today. Rachel, can you hear me? Perfect.
Yes, Gloria, I would like to first and foremost say I'm very happy and excited to see you once again. It's been a minute. And I want to express how much I am very happy to see our panelists. It's been quite a journey, and I can't believe this is actually happening. And I'm sorry for those who are yet to join, but I'm going to talk about a little bit of NextGen. I know for most people here, it's probably the first time they're going to hear about NextGen. And also it's going to be also the first time to hear about Knight-Hennessy. So this is going to be a wonderful session for us. So now for those who are not acquainted with NextGen, NextGen is basically an organization that was formed to avail academic opportunities to students. And most of us here on this platform, you can all testify that when it comes to global opportunities, we have less representations because first and foremost, people are unaware of these opportunities. So that's where we came in as NextGen. We were like, no, this should not be. If there are these global academic opportunities and our very own students can benefit from those, we should spread news about this, raise awareness about the various opportunities. So that's how NextGen came to, come up. And far from just sharing these academic opportunities, Knight-Hennessy, broad scholarship, since we have Gloria on the platform, we went further than that, and then we started our flagship mentorship program. So in the mentorship program, it's an annual program where we bring in our students. If you're an African student, you have a lot of obstacles, minus the fact that you don't have access to information. Even if you have the information, you don't know what to do to stand out. You're applying as a global citizen, as a global applicant. So most of the time, students are unaware of the application processes. And just the fact that it's not just that person applying. So what we do in the mentorship program is that we bring students, either undergrad or grad, and we have a team of mentors working from different parts of the globe, working together to, prep the students so that they achieve their academic dreams. And then number three, we have, that is not enough because as you can see, we are around 2 years old as an organization. And in the mentorship cohort, we've managed to help about 100 students, almost roughly 100 students. So that's a very small number compared to all, random East African students that are out there and hungry for this information. So what we do is we organize these kinds of information, info sessions. And I think this is very critical because, first of all, those who are not able to be part of the mentorship program, they get to gain this kind of information because, first of all, we invite African scholars who've been able to ace these different awards, and they get to share with us the opportunities. And I love the kind of setting that we chose. We usually invite African scholars who've gone to this big, who've won this big, hours, and they come here, they share with us their journey, their experience, and what students on this platform can do to also, first of all, know about this award, and if they think about applying, they get to apply at a better level. So basically, that's what we're doing, availing information, running the mentorship program, and also organizing periodic webinars. So I would like to also say a huge thank you to our panelists today. As you can see, most of the times, everybody that we work with in NextGen, they're people we've never met. We just reach out to them, knock at their doors, tell them what we are doing, who we are, and just ask them to join. So the fact that you're seeing these people today is that they're really attached to the mission. They want to make your journey much easier, to enlighten your journey, and I would like to say thank you to all of you, Mr. Joseph, Mr. Awori, Mr. Ghislain, and there is another one I'm forgetting, is it Fabrice, and also Gloria for, moderating this powerful session. And I call upon each and every person that is on this platform today, take a pen and a paper. Let this not, and I'm not on this platform, the people have always been part of our webinars. Let this not be just another webinar. Let it be an opportunity for you to learn about Knight-Hennessy. And if you're thinking about graduate studies, take notes. Ask these people, if you have already things that you've started working on, ask them, say, hey, I already have my personal statement, but then how can I articulate it to stand out in a way that it can be on the radar of a Knight-Hennessy, someone who is evaluating that. So that's all from me. I wish you all the best, and let's stick together, learn from each other, and make a difference. That's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for that introduction of Next Gen. And, so without further ado, I want to welcome again our panelists. If you have any questions, you can send them to us. And now I'm just going to start with asking our panelists really to introduce themselves to our audience. Who are you? What are you doing? And just tell us a little bit more, especially for Eugene and Jill. Just describe what is Knight-Hennessy for people who might actually be here and they don't know what it is. And so just a bit of an introduction. Who are you? Where are you at right now in life, and what is Knight-Hennessy, and what propelled you to apply when you did? The floor is, we can start from Gil. Also, my apologies if I mispronounced your name. So I will also take that opportunity to actually see what is the right pronunciations, because it varies from place to place.
Good morning, Gloria. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gilles. I am from Haiti. I'm from Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And I am currently at Stanford. Just moved in last week to start my master's in international policy as a Knight-Hennessy scholar. I graduated from undergrad in May. I went to undergrad at Princeton. Actually, Gloria, Jaime Romero from Colombia said to say hi. We went to high school together. And yeah, I mean, we can talk, we can dive into it more. And Knight-Hennessy is kind of a fellowship at Stanford that funds up to 3 years of graduate study. And I'm still new to actually the experience of being a Knight-Hennessy scholar, but I can speak about the experience of applying and learning about it. I learned about Knight-Hennessy from the fellowship office at my college in undergrad, among a bunch of other fellowship opportunities in my junior year. And I think it was kind of like, wow, okay, a whole world that just opened to me. Because at the beginning, I think I was very much focused on graduating and getting a job, and and I wasn't very aware of these opportunities. And so when I did, I became interested in exploring what they could do, what these opportunities are, and essentially how they could fit within my kind of life journey. So I'm happy to talk about this more, but I'll leave it to Eugene too. And it's good to meet you, Eugene. An elder. We respect the elders. In fact, maybe you should have started, but it's good to meet you, Eugene.
Thank you so much, Jill. It's my knowledge that Eugene would have been the first African to get the Knight-Hennessy. And so, yes, we are going to learn a lot from the wisdom of the elders. And so, Eugene, it's your turn. If you could just introduce yourself a little bit and tell us what is Knight-Hennessy again for people who might just be joining and not really know what the program is. Yeah, and then we'll take it from there.
Well, thank you very much, Gloria, for, and team, Rachel, and everyone putting this together. And Jill, pleasure to meet you as well. My name is Eugene. I'm from Kenya, actually currently in Nairobi. I'm from Kenya. I am an investment professional in the infrastructure space. I currently work with a fund that's based out of Casablanca in Morocco, called Africa 50, which is a Pan-African investor in the infrastructure space. So we build infrastructure across Africa. And we have a couple of projects in Rwanda, Kigali Innovation City, and also rolling out electric buses with a company called Busigo. If you've seen some electric buses in Kigali, that's actually a project I was in Kigali for sometime last year. I've worked in the infrastructure space for the last 10 years since I graduated undergrad here at the University of Nairobi in Kenya. I did study, actuarial science and trained to be an actuary in the UK. Before my current role at Africa 50, I was at Stanford for business school. So correction, Gloria, I was the first African to go to the business school on a Knight-Hennessy scholarship. But there were a few other Africans who were in other programs from the previous cohort. I was in the second Knight-Hennessy cohort. And before business school, I was based out of London, working with the International Finance Corporation, which is part of the World Bank Group, doing the same thing I'm doing now. And before that, I started my career here in Kenya, working with a company, a private equity firm called Center Investment, that I just started to invest in the infrastructure space. So that's my career background. I have a family. I have 2 daughters. We live in Stockholm, so that's where I spend most of my time in Sweden.
Thank you so much, Eugene, for that introduction. And it's really nice to see the balance in the panel as well. You did your undergrad in Kenya, and so you can bring that perspective, as well as Gil, you did yours in the US. So for those who are abroad too, you can bring in that perspective. And so now we are going to get Ghislain to introduce himself as well and tell us, what is Ghislain?
All right. Yeah, thanks, Gloria. I'm Ghislain Irakoze, and I'm a Rwandan. I just came from Oxford. Right now, I'm just calling it from Kigali. So at Oxford, I was doing a Masters of Public Policy as a Weidenfeld Hoffman Scholar. And right now, I'm just transitioning, just taking a quick break before transitioning to Stanford to start Masters of International Policy, specializing in cyber policy and security. So I'm just in the same class with Jill. Yeah, nice to meet you, Jill. So, and yeah, happy to kind of like provide just a few details about Knight-Hennessy School. I went from the same process, but unlikely I didn't get the, but happy to provide like few information for folks that are wondering about admission process at Knight-Hennessy, as well as just broadly at Stanford University, as well as people are interested to explore more about other opportunities beyond Knight-Hennessy, because I got what they call Freeman Fund Fellowship, so which is another opportunity at Stanford that people might be wondering about. And yeah, so beyond my academic background, I've engaged in policy, worked with European Union Commission, World Wide Web Foundation on different digital transformation programs across Africa. And I also run a company in Rwanda called Waste Zone, which is engaging in the digital transformation, providing refurbished devices to low-income communities across Rwanda. Yeah, so happy to be here, and so glad to provide like insights to people who are interested in joining Stanford.
Thank you so much again. I really love the diversity that we have in our panel. So I think we are all going to really enjoy the conversation. And so to start off this conversation, and I can just ask people, the person who shows up on my screen first, and then other people can chime in. So when you are preparing for a Knight-Hennessy application, what are the most important things to focus on? And then through that, you can also tell us what are some of the challenges, especially as somebody from the African continent, that you may be encountering. or some of the lessons, but take us through what are the most important things, if you can even put them to three. Like if you were to focus on three things, what are the most important things you would focus on as you are putting your application together? We will start now from Eugene, and then we can take it from there.
Okay, well, I mean, it's been a while since I worked on my application program. I think I think my advice might be different from the rest of the panelists. I think students, especially students from Africa, need to focus on getting accepted into the program and less on the scholarship. Because I think the reality, and I think one deterrent that stops a lot of people from applying to schools in the US, many people look at the sticker price. I remember when I was applying to the MBA, back then the average US MBA cost $250,000 versus maybe, I think it was $30,000 or $50,000 to go to Oxford in the UK. And so many people will look at that and say, let me just apply to Europe because it's cheaper. I think the reality is that US schools have, the big US schools have massive endowments, and they do provide a lot more in terms of financial aid, even outside of scholarships. So I think people need to focus on getting into the program. The reality is that if you're a good applicant and the school wants you to be accepted, they will do everything to make sure the financing works for you. So I think people should, first focus on getting accepted into the program. If you're not being accepted into the program you're applying to, Knight-Hennessy will not even consider you as a candidate. So I think the focus needs to be on that. In terms of, and I think if you meet the requirements that your specific program is looking for, then you've probably ticked, two out of the three boxes of what Knight-Hennessy is looking for, right? So I think the initial focus has to be on that. And then if you end up getting, a prestigious scholarship like Knight-Hennessy or any other, then that's sort of more like icing on the cake. So I think people should put the focus more on the program. And then, different programs will have multiple scholarships. In my time, I think Stanford also had an Africa Fellowship Scholarship, which I applied to also and got accepted. So I think, and then also the school also does provide fellowships. So there are people who don't get a scholarship, but there's a pot of money that's shared across the class based on need. So once you've been accepted, and let's say you're working in Africa, you aren't making that much money compared to your classmates, then you're going to get the largest share of that money. And there are many other ways, which I'm sure, Gilles and Ghislain can speak about, like, being a teaching assistant while studying. There are many other ways to make the financing stack up. In terms of what to look for, I think, Knight-Hennessy scholarship, like any prestigious scholarship, I think all I'd say is the program needs to be sure that if you become successful, that success will extend beyond you and your family to your community. I think that's the most important thing for them to believe. Nobody's going to pay, hundreds of thousands of dollars for you to go to school just so you can benefit yourself. So that when they look at your background and your experience and the things you want to do with your future career, they have to feel that this person has the potential to have a great impact on Rwanda or on Africa. I think that's something they must feel when they read your application. But I'll let the other panelists maybe go into the detail.
Gilles or Ghislain, you can feel free to jump in. But yes, to highlight the two important things, focus on getting into the program, and then also global leadership beyond just you as an individual.
I'm happy to jump in real quick. I think that was very interesting, Eugene. I when I was applying, it was surprising to think about the program application as distinct from the fellowship. In fact, I think I learned about the fellowship first, and then I heard, oh, they're willing to fund almost everything. So let me look into what program best aligns with my interest, and I and to know that like that's something that could come separately. I think the Knight-Hennessy application is even earlier. I think it's October. Somewhere in October. My program's application date was in December. So I genuinely approached both applications as two different endeavors. And so the Knight-Hennessy, I focused on, I would say, understanding, I guess the first piece of advice is probably understand what the Knight-Hennessy is looking for. They have very clear instructions on what I guess what they are looking for in your application. So there's leadership and there's like a civic mindset, as Eugene mentioned, being willing to give back, and that's something that you need to demonstrate to what you've already been doing, and also like curiosity. Like I think I kind of organize my applications around these three ideas. What did I do to give back? What have I been doing to give back? How am I a curious person? Going on new adventures, learning new things all the time. And because the fellowship is um brings together people from across schools at Stanford. So you have people in the law school, people in the business school, people, and then you all share the space together and attend events together. And that's one part that I'm genuinely so excited about, because at lunch, I'm excited to talk to my peers about what I learned in my policy classes, but also learn from them about, what they've been working on in law or in medicine, like what kind of businesses, and being in an environment that's so stimulating. I sense that they want people who are gonna take advantage of that, and be curious. So I would add that. And I'd say one thing that helped me a lot was also seeing the Hennessy, even everything before, seeing Princeton and the program I did before. I did a program called United World College. And so um, seeing all those things, not as end goals, but as things that are helping me get to where I want to be. And it can be very difficult, because I mean these labels are so powerful. It feels like, oh wow, like if I just get this thing, then I'm set for the rest of my life, kind of thing. And I actually think it can be counterproductive, because if you're working towards the fellowship, you're not nimble enough to, like, one, you don't necessarily come off as genuine. Even if I think you can be intentional, but you don't necessarily come off as genuine. Is like, that is like what you've always been wanting to do, and is to get this scholarship. But two, once you get it, what happens next? And I think it could have been very easy after going to Princeton to be like, okay, hey guys, I have that label. Let me sit back and relax. But the goals, the aspirations never stopped. And so I was able to look at what Princeton had to offer and use the resources available to me. And then I am definitely gonna do the same thing here at Stanford. It doesn't stop here. So why I'm saying this is because all of this comes off in your application. It's like, I think it comes off in your application. Are you doing are you genuinely, because they want to help you achieve something great. Like, it's also in the benefit of the program to say, oh, you know, Eugene was from the second generation. Look at, this is what he's doing. Look at, this is what he's doing 10, 15, 20, 40 years later. And so being able to convey that, how the fellowship will empower you to reach your goals, and that you really, really want the fellowship, but you're also not like bounded by it. And it would actually be their loss if they don't fund you. And not in a cocky way, but in a, determined way. I think comes off in an application as well. So those are the two things I would add to what Eugene shared. So knowing what they're looking for and being intentional about making your application fit that description, thinking about your life in those terms for the application, for the context of the application, and then second, always looking beyond your time at Stanford, but also more broadly, like 10, 15, 20 years later, showing that they are making a long-term investment by sponsoring you.
Thank you so much, Gilles. Ghislain, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think the champions already said everything, but I just have like a few details to add. Thanks, Jill and Eugene. Yeah, maybe just touching base on Eugene's comment, especially on multiple funding options available at Stanford. I do remember applying for Knight-Hennessy during, I mean, see, it's just a two-stage process. You have to complete the Knight-Hennessy application. and also continue with the graduate school application. So during the graduate school application, you have like a chance of indicating interest in different funding options. For instance, in our department, we have already World Bank scholarship, which is hosted by department. So which is like another funding channel. We also have like other departmental fellowship, like the one I'm holding right now, the Freeman Fund Fellowship. So just think about like all these available funding options. So don't put all your chances in one basket. Just find possibility of exploring other funding options available and also give them a chance, because after because during the Knight-Hennessy application, I just kind of like ended my journey at the first stage, so which is like the video stage. And I do remember that time, it was like January, so that's like almost 2 months after the deadline of the graduate school application. So you don't wait for the Knight-Hennessy results just to start exploring other options available, because the time that you get the results from Knight-Hennessy, most of other funding options that which are available at Stanford maybe already closed that time. So that's why like during the Knight-Hennessy application, you need to start explore like all other available funding options, because they are. So, but you really need to just go deeper through department, just reach out to departments just to find multiple options available, because I do believe beyond Knight-Hennessy, there are other funding options that could assist. Yeah, and then beyond that, what I would just say about the application process itself, I think it was kind of breathtaking on my end, because I do remember we had to share 10 facts about ourselves. Like it was the first time kind of like dealing with that process, like just do like a self screening just to identify what are just the 10 facts about myself that I have to share. And you just have like a few words to share like per each fact. So how do I describe myself in a way that like in distinctive way that I capture like all my qualities and put them in these boxes, like in just limited words. So I think the process itself was quite self-reflective. I took time to reflect on my leadership journey just to find qualities that make really distinctive as a leader. And I do remember I had to reach out to my team in my company just to help in the process. Like, what are specific qualities that I have seen that I've already demonstrated in the last 5 years, and they have been really super helpful in the process. But the process itself was really amazing. So that's why, if I would just compliment what Gil said, try to take the process as a learning journey to get to know yourself better, and also try to visualize what you want to achieve in the next 10 years, because this is an investment they're making you. So you have to make sure that you're really well positioning to tap into all available opportunities in Knight-Hennessy, as well as just give back to the community after completing your studies.
Thank you so much for that response. And actually, you almost had read my mind, because I'm going to continue in that story you had started to share about, the application process. How do you go about answering those questions? And so my next question is, how can students either in Africa or the Caribbean, or, so how can they leverage our unique stories and backgrounds to stand out in the Knight-Hennessy selection process? And so, or Stanford process, generally speaking. So how can, from our place, use those stories, that background to come up with a strong application? And you can also sort of start to point out to our audience some of those things that they might have to do. For example, the 10 fun facts that they are going to do about themselves. I had the video stage. And so as you respond, if you can already start to identify some of those aspects of the applications so that the audience start to be familiar with it from now. Gilles, maybe you can start with us off on this question.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the application process, as Ghislain said, I think I was in a kind of like the fellowship application process in general is just such an exciting time where you sit down and you have to rethink your entire life and make it make sense. Like, and it is an unnatural process, if I'm being completely honest, because I don't think we go through life thinking, oh, I'm gonna do this, then I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna do this. And things happen, we develop new interest. But an important part of the fellowship application process is to, and everybody knows, life is not linear, but I think it's about taking the time to reflect on what's happened, and okay, how do all these pieces fit in together, even if it wasn't intentional, even if it was accidental. How do they all fit together, and how is this fellowship kind of, or this next opportunity kind of the culmination of all of that? And beyond that, what is going to do to you and your career long term? And those are kind of the three pieces. And once we understand what the application is essentially testing for, which is, okay, they give you the selection criteria, you kind of understand how they think through it. Then um it's all about like telling your story in a way that fits that narrative. And I think for me that was also a bit unnatural, because um graduating, I had so many ideas of what, like, there are so many directions I could take my life in. Like, I could do this, and I think it's nice, but when you're applying, you kind of have to think about your life in a more linear way than it actually is. The reason being, at the end of the day, I think it's a competition, right? And whoever applies, I think they're pretty much sure, like, oh, these people, to even be considered for these fellowships, you're probably gonna make it and be great in life. Like, this is just how it is. It's like there's a level, there's like regression discontinuity for people who are in stats, like around the threshold, people have similar outcomes, right? But for the purposes of giving funding, it matters that people feel inspired by your story. Like, they know, even if you're unsure, but like you have kind of like a North Star, like you have guiding principles, you have a general idea of what you want to do and how you want to do it, not just in a very abstract way of like, oh, I would like to solve climate change. That's great, but how exactly do you intend to do that? And I think um that thinking about the application in that term, in those terms, even if at first I was like, okay, I don't know exactly how this fits, but like sitting down and doing this exercise of like, okay, this is how they want me to think about my life. And I actually really enjoyed this process, because through the fellowship process, I got so much clarity on the next 5, 10 years of my life. It's insane, because I was forced to do it. I was forced to think about like how everything fits together. And even though it felt unnatural, I think it was incredibly helpful. And the second thing I would say is to think about Stanford as a school, in particular, and I definitely feel like the Silicon Valley, kind of environment, you know, the Knight-Hennessy wants to differentiate itself from fellowships like the Rhodes or the Gates. And so how they do that is on focusing on what Stanford itself has to offer. Um, and I feel like they have a strong focus on a lot of like entrepreneurship, kind of leadership types, and the type of speakers who come in. It's all about doing things and making things. You get funding to, you can pitch your projects to your fellow Knight-Hennessy scholars. You get funding to go on conferences and launch startups. It's so interesting. I personally haven't, tapped into that yet. It's still early on. But I just feel like understanding the spirit of the school also can be helpful, particularly in the context of Stanford. How are you gonna take advantage of what Stanford specifically has to offer? The environment. Um, it doesn't have to be, oh, I'm gonna start my next, the next biggest startup and make a lot of money, but it can be, it's in general taking advantage of being in Silicon Valley, that entrepreneurial spirit and the energy and the resources, and beyond your program and the fellowship, everything else that's around. And I've started exploring San Francisco, Silicon Valley in general, and as someone who's in the humanities, who's doing migration stuff, it's been interesting kind of stepping outside my comfort zone to actually explore, okay, while I'm here for 2 years, let me open myself up to what Stanford specifically has to offer. So I would say those two things, and thinking about what the application is testing for and how it will be read, to figure out how you have to frame a story. And the other thing is like focusing on like to an extent on what being at Stanford on the West Coast in the US in Silicon Valley has to offer. And again, beyond that, some of it, is outside of your control. It's a bunch of goats applying, and it's very hard to pick goats from goats. So you just put your best foot forward, and you kind of hope that the rest happens by itself.
Thank you so much for really pointing out, especially that how it can be very uncomfortable and unnatural at the beginning when you are doing this deep reflection on your life. How does X leads to Y, M and N? But it really is a very rewarding process. I can attest to that as well. And I also love the idea that you can't just also be focusing on the scholarship, because you would be doing the scholarship at a school, which is Stanford. And so they also want to know that you are going to survive there, which is also why Eugene suggested that you actually also look at the program itself that you want to do, so that everything really is a harmonious kind of story that they see you are going to survive in your program in Stanford, generally speaking, and of course in the Knight-Hennessy community, which is really, really good advice. And so Eugene, if you can also continue to tap into this application process. So for African students, Kenyans or Rwandans, or anybody else on the call, how can we, when we are reflecting on this application process, putting all the dots together, how can we leverage some of our unique stories and background to actually stand out in the application process? We keep on highlighting how this is a global application. You are going to be competing with people from, different backgrounds. And so how can you sort of bring in the background that you have in your place to actually stand out in the application process?
Yeah, thanks, Gloria. And maybe we should just take it, maybe zoom out a little bit. I know the different people on the call have different levels of knowledge about what this scholarship is about. And maybe it might make sense just to give a little bit of background. So Knight-Hennessy is a multidisciplinary scholarship program at Stanford University for graduate students. It does pay, it does fund graduate degrees, so master's and PhD degrees for 3 years of funding. So you could either get 3 years of your PhD funded, or you could get to do two joints. Usually in the US, master's programs take 2 years, but if you're doing a joint degree, then you do the 2 degrees in 3 years, and so then Knight-Hennessy can fully fund you. They do pay for tuition, do pay for other costs like your student accommodation, and also give the scholars a stipend that is, to be honest, more than enough to survive on campus. They do also pay for flight tickets home, and have a lot of other benefits. I think it's probably the most generous scholarship program I have seen. They're even open to funding. Scholars can come up with ideas that the program will fund. And also, if you do come up as scholars, because the whole point of the scholarship is to bring people from different programs so that they can solve problems from different perspectives. So, I've seen even in my cohort, scholars came together to start, businesses which were then funded by Knight-Hennessy scholarship. So that's sort of what the program does. On campus, you also have a scholar house called Denning House, which is a really beautiful house that, is a shared space for the scholars. So you can go there, lots of food and snacks, be beautiful. It's a beautiful place to go, but that's to encourage people to come together. Of course, there are training sessions that you do every week as a scholar, but also just to, hang out, have drinks and catch up with people and listen to, what other people are studying. So that's sort of how the program is structured. In terms of the application, again, I did share the link from the admissions page, so feel free to have a look at that. But maybe as somebody applying from, I know some of you maybe have done your undergraduate degree in Rwanda. I don't know how this works in Rwanda, but in Kenya, for instance, we don't do application We don't do an elaborate application process to go to university. When you're in your final year of high school, you just select what degree programs you'd like to go to which universities. And then if you get the grade that meets the cutoff mark, then you get admitted. You don't have to write essays, you don't need recommendation letters and all this stuff. So doing an application process to a school in the US is extremely daunting because you have to, there's a qualitative and there's a quantitative. I think we only do the quantitative side here. What was your GPA? When did you graduate? What did you study? So there's that part, of course, and every program again has its own requirements, and some programs require that you do an entrance exam. I had to do the GMAT before I could apply to the business school. And to be honest, a lot of this is planning, and you need a lot of planning to be able to apply to these kind of programs and put in a good application. So I'll encourage everyone, even if you're not applying now, maybe you do plan to apply 2-3 years down the line, go to the application portal, click apply, and just go through the pages to start seeing the kind of questions that are asked. And then you start preparing your background so that by the time you're applying, you can tick most of the boxes that the program is looking for. So that's sort of what I'd say. Broadly, as someone applying from Africa, I think Africa, you have a unique experience, and you have to bring that out in the application process. Yes, you're competing with people from all over the world. You're also competing with Africans who are abroad, right? So if you're applying from Rwanda, there's also another Rwandan who was born and raised in the US or in Europe who's applying, and all these people are your competition. So you have to ask yourself, what unique experience can you bring to your program? Again, graduate studies is not just about learning from your professor, it's also learning from each other. And people want to have a class that has diverse perspectives so that your classmates can also learn from you. So you have to think about what is so unique about your Rwandan experience that you need to bring out in your application. And of course, there are many ways to do that depending on what program you're working on. And when I think about it, for me, again, there's, I think for me, having grown up here in Kenya, gone to school here, and started my career here, I have a different perspective from a Kenyan maybe who grew up in London or in the US, and you have to bring that out. Broadly, what I'll say is I think a Stanford education is really centered along problem solving, and Stanford wants its graduates to tackle sort of problems and not just be successful individually, but to have great impact in your community. It just does happen that in the last couple of decades, technology is what has transformed the world a lot, right? But Stanford education is not just about tech; it's really problem solving. So you have to think about what is the problem. If I think about the dinners, one of the things you do as Knight-Hennessy scholars, you have small dinners with some of Stanford alumni and some of the donors who live around the Bay Area. So I remember, one time, they'd probably call 5-10 scholars and tell you tonight you're having dinner with, say Phil Knight, the founder of Nike. And they'll welcome you to their homes for a couple of hours, and you have dinners and just talk about. Usually, the discussion was largely, what is the biggest problem in the community you come from? And that will be a very interesting discussion, and then we'd dive into that, and then people would say, how can we then solve this particular problem? And so that's what the dinners are about. So if you're applying, think about what is this problem in Rwanda or in Africa that I would like to contribute. Now, you don't have to fix climate change, right? You don't have to promise you're going to cure cancer, but you have to find that particular problem that you think is significant for your country or for the continent, and you have some input you can do in that. For me, I saw infrastructure as a big problem. Africa has a $100 billion gap in infrastructure investment every year, and the governments don't have the money to finance this. So what do? We go abroad, we raise dollars, we build our infrastructure, but then that ties the country for 20, 30, even 50 years, paying that infrastructure back, which you finance in dollars. And we all know what happens to African currencies every year, they keep weakening. So we all have infrastructure we can't afford. We can't afford our power, we can't afford our transport. And I see that as a problem. And it's a problem because if you look at some of the social unrest we're seeing around the continent, it's largely because governments have to keep increasing taxes to be able to pay these loans, right? And that's a ticking time bomb. And for me, this was the problem I said I want to tackle. I want to do infrastructure in Africa and finance it with local capital. So whatever career you're in, think about what is a big problem that you'd like to contribute towards solving, and what's your personal experience with that particular problem.
That was really, really insightful. In terms of thinking about what is the question, I think it's really nice, especially when you're writing your personal statement. What is the problem in your community that you want to solve, or you have already started to contribute towards solving? And that's exactly what they want you to talk about. I have seen a couple of people make a lot mistakes on trying to hunch on to the buzzwords these days. So if it's like climate change, literally when I'm reading some applications from like 100 like participants, I would say like 50 are talking about climate change. Which again, if people are passionate about climate change, then that would be good. So I think it's better to actually sit down and reflect on, in this community I'm from, which problem, or which community that you want to think about. What is the problem there? How have you already started contributing towards it? And how are you going after Stanford to continue to address that? As opposed to, sort of just looking for the buzz thing, the trend thing going on and writing on it. Because again, it sort of narrows down the competition for you, because you can almost bet on it that many other people are going to talk about that particular thing. And so make sure when you are doing your application, you actually put into the application things you are genuine about versus things that are trending in that time period. So yeah, really, 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 really great conversation. So now to Ghislain, I love the fact that you had already started hinting at you already had a company, but you were also studying. You really just did your degree at Oxford, and you have a lot of things going on in the background. And for these big scholarships and Stanford graduate school, generally speaking, they are looking for people who can balance their academics, but also, do leadership, showcase that these problems we have identified in our community, we are actually doing something about it. And so I would love for you to speak on, how do you manage to sort of balance in the applications, your academic, but also leadership experience. And for people who are thinking about applying, how can they already start thinking about those two pillars in terms of academics and leadership?
All right, just for quick information here, I joined, I got into Stanford and Oxford at the same time. So to leave Stanford just to the next year. Which is the current year. So that was like back in 2023. So the application process in 2023. So you cannot do those graduate schools at the same time doing like work. So I had to kind of leave my company, just designate a managing director to oversee everything. But just speaking about the leadership experience, I think Eugene and Gil have already shared like a lot of critical insights, which might be useful during the application process. Maybe what I can add, which is like one of the few kind of like mistakes I've seen in different applications I've read. Coming through the African background, we are not used writing essays. As Eugene mentioned, I believe it's the same process in Rwanda, just transitioning from high school to the universities in Rwanda. You don't do essays, so you just kind of like fill out application form, and then you are allocated in a specific university. So these essays or application process from the Western system might be quite frightening for people just doing them for the first time. So one of the tools I find really useful in this case is just utilizing theory of change framework. So for people that want to visualize the impact, or maybe people who don't know how to approach storytelling, so theory of change framework is really useful in kind of like trying to see the inputs. So basically, what are the skills, networks that you want to utilize in making an impact, and also what are the outputs. So if you're in the research you're doing or a venture that you're doing, what are specific outputs that you will generate to kind of like reach the specific impact metrics. And I think this also goes beyond on the story that you're providing. You also have to quantify it. So reviewers want to see, okay, if we give you a chance to get like a specific scholarship, how is the solution, like a research you're doing, or maybe the venture you're proposing, pursuing after the graduate school, what the specific number of people that the research or the venture you'll be creating will reach. So try to quantify your impact. You don't have to overestimate, just try to be realistic and provide some metrics that reviewers can just see and say, okay, this is something that we will be happy support through this program. Yes, just be intentional, quantify your impact, and try to utilize tools. There are different tools beyond the theory of change framework that I've provided here that can help you to understand impact that you want to create in your community. Try to visualize the impact and also facilitate you to illustrate the story in a sense that it captures the interest of people who are reviewing your application.
Thank you so much. And Ghislain, if there is like a website or something that people can actually look into the theory of change framework as a tool, it would be nice if you can drop the link in the chat, that way people can actually reference it.
Happy to provide the link. Yeah, sure. I'll drop it in the chat.
Yes, you can just drop it in the chat, that way people have it. And so now for the audience, I'm going to ask one more question, but then for the audience, we'll then move to Q&A. So if you have any questions that you are thinking about, you can already start sending them to our co-hosts. I think you should be able to send it to anybody of those three people, or our panels, or me directly, and then we can go into the Q&A later after we answer this final question. And so actually connecting to what Ghislain was already saying, there are a lot of tools that people have used in their applications, especially these days. There is a lot of proliferation of AI tools, which people sometimes can use in their application process. So I wanted for you to speak on that, because it's inevitable now. So what would be the best way to actually use these tools so that they are helpful, but they still they don't compromise some of what I think schools like Stanford would actually not allow for? And so speak to our audience in terms of using AI tools or even other tools that they can come across. What is the best way to use these tools in a way that's assistive, but will not get to compromise the quality of the application? So this question, any of you can start off the conversation. But I really want to address that because it keeps on coming to me when people are doing their applications.
Everyone is trying to figure out how to deal with AI, and there's a lot of there's quite a bit of inconsistency in how different universities or different programs like approach like the use of artificial intelligence. I think as a general rule, it can be helpful in planning for your application. I think that's where it is the most powerful. You can say, hey, you can have a conversation. It's a bit like having a conversation with an advisor or like a counselor. And that's another thing that I forgot to highlight, that make sure you have people to help you, and people who are familiar with the process, and we will take the time to sort of get to know you and give you advice on how to approach the fellowship application process. And sometimes, like, some schools have fellowship advisors that have done this for years, and so they're super qualified. And with as if with every advice, everybody who's giving you advice, you kind of have to take, like, you have to take leadership in the advice that you're getting, and not just be like, oh, they told me to do this, therefore I'm doing that. Make it, because at the end of the day, it's your application. That being said, I think seeing AI as a kind of advisor, especially because I know there's not that it's not, you may not find this person at your school was advised, Knight-Hennessy scholars or Rhodes scholars or Gates scholars or anybody who's studied abroad. You may not have these people like handy. So using AI could be actually very helpful. Um, I say could because I don't really know. And maybe tomorrow there's a new rule that says you can't. But then again, I don't think that's gonna happen because people are starting to understand AI is here to stay. We might as well learn how to work within it. And so things I would say big no-nos, don't have AI write your essays for you. Don't have like I think when you think about, I think when I think about how AI works, it's actually not in my interest to have AI write my essays because it kind of makes it all sugar, no spice. You're reading an application and you're like, this is too well put together to the point that it's not interesting. Um, there's a lot of buzzwords and it's just like blend. And again, when I say that, even as it on its own, it could stand out and be a great essay. But when you're thinking about it being a competition, like how so many other people are working and the applications are being reviewed by humans, you want to connect with people on an emotional level. And so, and you want someone to read your essay and feel like, oh, I remember this essay or this person for the way they told their stories or for what they shared. And I think using AI to help you think through the application, maybe AI, you fed your AI your resume, and then you're like, how do I approach this? Like, I'm interested in X thing. How would I go? How should I go about that? Um, and that could be helpful. But beyond that, I think I would be very sober in my use of AI. Also, that might also be because I'm just an AI skeptic. So I make very limited, very targeted use of it in my life, and because I kind of want to let that Gil effect come out. And people may like it, they may not like it, but at the end of the day, that's what you're getting. So, whereas AI kind of, I think, has a way of, conforming, making you more palatable. It's good for business, I think, less so for an application.
Thank you so much for really highlighting that. One of the things that every other panelist here highlighted is the reflective process that goes into your application, which ultimately is really what makes you stand out. And so AI won't be able to do that for you. It won't know that, oh, this time when you were going to high school, you were thinking about, doing this project and this is how you ended up in your major or etc. And so it's really, really important that you do the human work to make the application stand out. Another way to think about it is if there are thousands of applicants and a good number of people use AI because it's very accessible to everybody, then you would start getting stories that almost look alike, which diminishes your competitive edge. And so my general advice, and we'll soon hear from Eugene also his take on this. My general advice, do not use AI for doing the creative thinking for you. You're telling your story. You can most certainly help it in the planning process, as Gilles said, but most applications actually would, scorn upon if you used AI to write your essays for you, because it's also very, very easy to tell when an essay has been written by AI versus a human being. So do not diminish your chances of even your application being reviewed because it gets flagged for having used AI. But Eugene, as we close and go into the application questions that the audience has, what is your take on using AI, on how best to use AI as people are putting together their applications?
Too bad there were no generative AI tools in my time, so so we didn't have the luxury. And like like Jill, I do have my own skepticism on AI, but I also get surprised by the kind of things AI can do nowadays. So I mean, if you feel comfortable, maybe you want to use it as a starting point, and then layer in your human element after that. I don't know, honestly. I don't have a take on this. Uh, Again, when it comes to these kind of applications, yes, people will give you advice and everything, but eventually you hold the pen, right? And if you feel strongly about something, I think just go ahead and do it. It's again, at the end of the day, none of us know why we got admitted to Stanford, right? I might tell you how I wrote a great essay, but admissions actually thought my essay was average. Maybe I got admitted because some other part of my application was good, right? So I think if you feel strongly about wanting to do something in your application, I think you should go ahead and do it. What I'd underline though, and when we're talking a lot about essays, is that again, for people who studied undergrad in Africa, the qualitative part of the application with the US schools is as important as the quantitative. So the quality of your essay and how well you tell your story, and also the recommendation letters you get, does determine a lot. Even if you have perfect GPA, everything else ticks, but the essays and recommendation letters are weak, you're not going to get accepted. So you need to do a lot of work. And I think to be a better writer, you have to be a better reader. So the only way to write a good essay is to read a lot of stories. So there are many blogs. I think different programs have different blogs that profile students. Go to the Knight-Hennessy website, read the bios of people who are in your program. What did they do before they went to Stanford? The more you read other people's stories, the more you'll start seeing the kind of things you need to speak about your own story. So I think that's important. Then the other place, again, a lot of African applicants mess up is on the recommenders. People who live in the West, they know how to work the system, especially in the US. Someone in high school already knows they will apply to Stanford for grad school, and they will need a recommender. So they look for Stanford alumni, and they start working for them even for free when they're still in high school. We don't get the same luxury here. Often when you start to apply is when you're learning everything at the same time. So you have to really start building up your recommenders. Your boss might like you, might like your job, but if they haven't been exposed to this kind of competitive scholarship programs or schools, it could be that their recommendation letter might not be. And especially, I know as East Africans, we tend to be quite modest about, we don't like to brag, right? We don't. So we're quite modest about ourselves and our abilities, and that really works against you in the West. So in the US, you'll find a second-year university student has already like 20 awards and honors in their resume, right? Because they just keep dishing them out. While we don't have that, right? So you have to find a recommender who has some exposure to this kind of programs, and then build a relationship with them so that they know you. It could be somebody at work, it could be, and I think for Knight-Hennessy, they ask for people who have known you for a long time. So you can't suddenly start looking for a recommender in the year you're applying. So if you had maybe a university professor that was a Rhodes Scholar or was in another competitive program that you had a good relationship with, maybe you need to maintain that even as you become a professional. One thing that helped me here is that I was a student leader in college, and so I had a great relationship with my dean, which I did maintain. So by the time I was asking him to write my Knight-Hennessy recommendation, he had known me for almost 10 years. And he'd known me beyond just being a student and being a leader that he supervised. There are many things I've done to try and support the students I left behind, like organizing internships and career talks. And so he had a lot to speak about other than me just being a student. So you need a recommender who knows you, even if it's your boss. They also need to know your other interests outside of work. What do you do on the weekend? What's your family background? What is, so you have to, there are no perfect recommenders. Ideally, your boss went to Stanford too, was an Knight-Hennessy scholar, they like you and they're supporting you going to grad school, fine. But you're never going to have that situation. So you have to work with what you have. And if, let's say, you have a great boss, they like you, they would write you a good recommendation, but maybe they don't know what you do outside work. Maybe you need to start speaking about that more. Recommenders are asked, what constructive feedback have you ever given this person, and how did they react? And how did they improve over time? So if you're not having those conversations with these people, they will not have anything to write. So that's something you have to be very, very intentional about, building those relationships and maintaining them. So I think essays and recommendation letters are where most of African applicants really suffer, because we haven't gone through that in undergrad. So please, and I don't know how AI can help there, because there just isn't a lot of data about African applicants online. Even I know a lot of students used to hire consultants that charge thousands of dollars to help with applications. But even when you speak to most of them, they've not really worked with a lot of African students, or they will try and box you into what they think an African applicant should say. And again, if it looks cookie cutter, it's unlikely to make it. To what Gil said, these people remember. I remember the first dean of admissions at Knight-Hennessy Scholar is called Derek Bolton. He used to be the dean of admissions at the business school. And when we reported to business school, he knew each and everyone's story. Over 400 people. He met you and he remembered everything about your essay and your application. So that's how much it has to stand out to them, for them to actually remember your story. And remember, they read every application, right? Thousands of applications, but they remember the ones that they admit.
Thank you so much. That was really, really, really powerful. So next, we are just going to quickly take a few questions from the audience. And so if you do have a question, you can raise your hand. And then I also did receive some questions from the chat, but we'll start with people in the audience. And then I think we can unmute Berthe to ask the question.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I want to start by asking Eugene, when you started talking about, you said to first focus on getting in the program. So I want to ask you, what program are you talking about? Is it master's program at Stanford? So yeah, I know at a point you wanted to take a step back, but you only explained about Kennedy, that fellowship, but you didn't really kind of taken two step backs and say, before you even get this Kennedy, I don't know if I'm spelling it right, you have to first get you are just referring it to as getting in the program. So please, if you can clarify that.
Yes, so there's a dual track. You have to get accepted to your degree program and also to the Knight-Hennessy program. And I've seen some people asking about degree programs that are not offered at Stanford. So first, you have to go and check what graduate programs are available at Stanford, and then see which of those does fit, which one or two of those do fit your interest. And again, there's a separate application for the school, and the timing is different. For the business school, for instance, the deadline will come before the Knight-Hennessy application. For other programs, I think clearly like international policy, it does come after. So you also have to know what are the dates for your program. For business, for example, if you're applying for an MBA and you want to be considered for a Knight-Hennessy program, the MBA usually has 3 application rounds. I think round 1, sometime in July, August, round 2, early, January, and then round 3 at sometime March, April. So you have to apply in round 1 if you're applying to the business school to be considered as a Knight-Hennessy scholar. So by the time you're getting your invitation to go interview for the scholarship, you probably have already been admitted to the business school. So you have to go and read both the Knight-Hennessy application website as well as the application website for the program you're applying to, so that you know what deadlines you're working with. In terms of recommendations, for instance, the business school, you could give, people just professional recommenders. For instance, I used my current boss at that time and my former boss for the business school, because they probably put a lot of weight on who you are as a professional. But then for Knight-Hennessy, I remember then, I don't know what it is now, it was clear that they wanted somebody who'd known you for about 10 years, and they're looking more for mentors rather than somebody who was your boss, right? It could be somebody who was, patron of a club organization that you led, or it could be maybe you're an entrepreneur, it could be, maybe a customer or somebody on your board, or it doesn't have to be somebody who was, your boss. I think that's so again, and I think somebody asked about that, is you want somebody who, and reality is, I remember even reading some, helping out with applications when I was at Stanford, you come across recommendation letters that are not positive quite frequently. So it's surprising that some people do approach someone to write a recommendation, and that person is pretty much saying, don't admit this person. So that's why you have to build that relationship. You can't just assume that, you know, this person wishes me well, right? So it has to be, how I did it with my recommenders is, especially with your boss, it can be tricky because maybe they don't want you to go, right? Or if you say you're applying to school, what if you don't get admitted, right? Then your boss is thinking your head is not here, you know, maybe does that affect your career growth? Again, in Western societies, this is very normal. In Africa, at times, it's not. You know, people take it personal when you say you're trying to leave. So you have to be, at times you have to be smart about it. At times the recommender could be somebody who's more senior than you, but they're not directly your boss. If you don't feel your boss is going to be supportive of you going to graduate school. So you have to be smart about it, but you want somebody, one, who is respected. So I can't just ask, you know, the intern who joined the company yesterday to write me a recommendation, right? There has to be some credibility to this person. So either they've had a, you know, their own accomplishment. I think one of my mentors was a Rhodes Scholar, right? So I knew if they look at that and say, okay, this guy was a Rhodes Scholar, if he's recommending somebody else and he's putting his reputation on the line. So it has to be someone, one, who is respected, that they accomplished in a way or the other in their own professional path or education. And then also somebody who knows you beyond just being a professional. So you have to cultivate that relationship with them. And also they have to be a great communicator, right? I remember I applied with a friend of mine who used to volunteer with a charity in the UK, and the head of that charity really, really liked this person. And he asked them to write a recommendation letter, but then she only wrote one paragraph saying, this is one of the most amazing people I've met, but she didn't have a lot of flesh, just because she had never had to write a recommendation for someone applying to such a school. So even though they really wanted to support, they just didn't know how to. So that's why at times it helps if, well, it's difficult, especially in Africa, to say, I'm going to work for a Stanford alum, right? In the West, at times when people pick what company to work for, they choose to go work. You know, some of you might know maybe a company called Cross Boundary that's, you know, in many African countries, and I think the big office here in Nairobi. I know many Americans who will leave their job in the US to come work for Cross Boundary because the CEO was a Stanford and a Harvard alum. So then they want them to write their recommendation. So in Africa, these people are not that accessible, but you could find somebody maybe who went to a different good university, was on a good scholarship program, or has had other accomplishments. Maybe they are a respected leader in their field in Rwanda or in Africa. So you can, you know, I think they won't tick all the boxes, but again, you could also have two recommenders who are speaking to different things. Maybe one knows you more as a professional, and one sort of knows more about your leadership potential, your attitude, and your values. So you can also balance that. And even as you apply to different schools care about different things, right? I won't mention the schools, but I know schools who care about the title of the person recommending you. All right. So if it's a more senior, at times you want the MD or the CEO to write a recommendation, but maybe it's your manager you work a lot with who actually knows you in ways that the CEO does not, right? And so different schools, again, different, you know, think about it differently. And I think for Stanford, really, they care about people who know you deeply. It doesn't have to be, you know, you know, if your parent is, if your dad or mom is a friend of the minister and they tell him, write your recommendation, but you haven't really, this person doesn't know you very well, I think that's going to be difficult for a school like Stanford. It could work for other schools, but at Stanford, they really care about the individual person they're admitting. So you have to make sure that this person really knows you.
Thank you so much for that very elaborate answer. And again, we really encourage the audience that you actually go on the website, both of Stanford, but also of Knight-Hennessy. Check out the basics. What is the scholarship looking for? What about the program? What do you want to do once you are at Stanford before you even start putting the application together? Because it shouldn't be the other way around. We do have quite a number of people who have their hands up.
Hi.
Yes, Dushimi Mana.
Thank you so much. My name is Dushiman Pacific. I am a graduate student at the American University of Beirut. I'm pursuing my master's degree in biomedical science. So I finished my undergraduate degree this year, June 2025. So I'm curious to know if, since I'm doing my master's degree in biomedical science, if this program, this scholarship can uh, fund my education at Stanford during to pursue my PhD. So I've seen that most of the people have been mentioning if you are doing undergraduate program, they didn't just talk about if you have a master's degree why you want to pursue a PhD degree. So is that possible with this scholarship, or you have to pursue your master's only? Thank you so much.
So I think that's an easy question. I can actually just answer it for the interest of time. So yes, this scholarship does fund both masters and PhDs up to 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. So actually, what we would want for the one of the panelists to speak to then is, if let's say you get into a PhD and it's the program is longer than 3 years, what happens funding wise for those who are interested in actually doing a PhD? That would be something good to speak to.
I think it's good to point out in most US schools, PhD programs are usually fully funded already, right? So if you get accepted to a PhD program, you will be funded. It just might mean that every year you're going to be doing funding applications to some of the donors that do fund research. But PhD programs tend to be funded in the US. So you should again, focus should be on getting accepted. If you're a Knight-Hennessy scholar, it just means that for the first 3 years, you will not be applying for funding to donors every year. You will have your funding already guaranteed. But PhDs, other PhDs at Stanford are also funded. So usually the reason it's 3 years is because this is a leadership training program, and it lasts a maximum of 3 years. After that, you don't now need to be in the program, but you still have access to Denning House. You still attend Knight-Hennessy events if you want. They do bring amazing speakers every week to Denning House. I think in my time we had people like LeBron James, Michelle Obama coming to Denning House. So you can still attend those events. You'll still be on campus, but you just won't be formally undertaking the program that the other scholars are undertaking. And maybe just thing to point out again, many African applicants don't know, you don't need a master's to do a PhD in the US. You can go straight from your undergraduate to a PhD program. You just need to demonstrate that you have keen interest and some experience in research. So if you've done some research work as an undergraduate, you can actually go straight to PhD.
Thank you so much, Eugene. And also back to the question on recommendations that you had already started answering. They were asking, could you please provide tips? This question is from Katya. Could you provide tips or important things to consider when choosing for recommenders, especially for people who have graduated years back and have not been in an academic setting for a while? So if they want to do a PhD, for example, but they have not been, in the academic space for a little bit, what would you recommend they sort of try to do in choosing their recommenders? And also, just to clarify, is there an age limit to the Knight-Hennessy application itself, or it's open to everybody?
I think they say something about you should have graduated within like after a particular year. It's all in the, let's see, eligibility. But while I'm looking into this, I think I think the most important thing is for your recommenders is I feel like, as Eugene said, you have the recommenders for your master's or your PhD or whatever program you're pursuing, and these recommendations I picked a professor I did research with, actually picked two professors I did research with. One who supervised my an independent research project, and another one I was a research assistant for them. And I was doing research on migration governance, and so it's very targeted to my master's application. And so I think it's more, if you've been out of school for a while, think about your program and what you're trying to, if what you're going for, and then pick someone, the person who's most able to speak to that in a positive way. In terms of the fellowship itself, I feel like you have a lot more wiggle room. It doesn't have to be academic at all. In fact, mine was intentionally not academic because I didn't want my 4 recommendation letters to say the same thing about me. I wanted people to talk about my research, and then my Knight-Hennessy recommenders were people I had worked with on programs and initiatives on campus. And I think they were able to speak about my work ethic and all these kinds of things, and how funny I am sometimes. I think it was good to have like this kind of sprinkle of humanity and I guess leadership. And so for that, I don't think that having graduated from school or not being in an academic setting for a while is actually gonna hinder application in that sense. And Knight-Hennessy says I think there's no restriction on age or degree or country of residency. But I do remember seeing something about graduating in 2000. Yeah, there it is. If you graduated with your bachelor's degree more than 7 years before your intended enrollment date, hence, so if you graduated in 2018 or earlier for next year, then you are not eligible for consideration as an Hennessy scholar.
Addition point there. So there is an
Yeah.
exception. So they have an exception for people that served in military. So they have an exception. They can extend that eligibility 2 years, like 2 additional years. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, good. But I think the message here is people please go actually check the website, look at the eligibility page. That way you don't go so far as to start putting all of these things together, only to realize that, let's say, there was an eligibility criteria that you actually weren't fulfilling. And so just do a refresher on looking at the updated information on the website. That way you have the updated thing. So we are sort of running out of time, so I'm just going to quickly glance through the questions and see if anybody has any question that we haven't responded to. So there is a question on, could somebody potentially talk about their personal life in the timeline we're talking about as they're putting together their application materials, or they only have to focus on their professional experience alone? So what is your experience with that? What kind of experience makes it into your application materials?
I would say the US is very interesting in that sense. For me, it was definitely a change. As Eugene mentioned, when you're applying, you mostly speak on, your grades. Back home, they look at your grades and boom, you're done. Like they don't care, but I think this, some of it felt very awkward for me to explain the struggles I had been through. It doesn't have to be the struggles. It could also be like, it doesn't have it's kind of striking a nice balance between being vulnerable and being vulnerable not for the sake of being vulnerable. I think in fact it can even be off-putting if people are like, oh, they're trying to get me to have an emotional reaction. I think I focused a lot more on context. If someone sees me coming from undergrad at Princeton, they might think, oh, this person was handed a silver spoon and whatever. But I'm just like, oh wait, hold on. I didn't fall out of a coconut tree into Stanford. I had experiences before, and there are things that, like, the reasons why I'm interested in migration is because I'm a migrant myself, and my parents, and the things I've seen, the things I've experienced. And it doesn't have to be you, but I think it's important to give people a window into your why. And I think that's why your what you've done, what you will do is very important. But what really resonates with people is that your why, because your what can change. And Knight-Hennessy, in fact, you don't have to do what you say you want to do. But if you convince them on your why, on your intrinsic motivations, what keeps you up at night, what motivates you, I feel like that's something that they can hold on to and say, okay, even if the mechanisms of how you actually go about change or evolve, your motivations remain. And I really want to give people a window into my motivations. But I think it's a nice balance to strike, which again, I think Americans have a lot more practice with that. Like how do you you share a little bit more about yourself in a way that's not like you're not trying to say, oh, things are tough, you actually take control over your own experience. So I don't know if people have things to add, but I think if I were to give someone an advice, I would say absolutely talk a little bit about you. They want to know who you are and where you are from, what keeps you up, what motivates you. And I think that's even more important than what you've done and what you want to do.
I just want to add something there. There's a reason before Obama ran for office, he wrote Dreams from My Father, right? His personal story is what made Americans vote for him. So that, people want to know that, but not explaining your struggles for the sake. No one is going to pity you into admitting you to school. It is saying how have these experiences shaped the person I am today and how I see the world. That's really what.
Thank you so much. So as we near the close of our conversation today, obviously we can't really go away without talking about some of the current political situation and in the US and what that might actually mean for people applying today. And so another question that came in says, could you please comment on whether there have been any impact that would be important to consider to apply that might have caused by the current, government? And so in terms of things like if you are even hold a migrant status, like is that as you are disclosing your story, like basically how do you, with the current political situation, what would be some of the tips, the advice you would, give people to consider? And if there anything they should really just look out, especially, given some of the unfortunate changes that are happening in the academic space today. So anything to look out for, any advice? And then we would sort of give a final advice to our audience, and then we'll close. But yes, let's start with that question of things to think about given the political situation that may be affecting academia.
Yeah, so logistic-wise, things are so challenging these days. I mean, so challenging, but as a change maker, so you have to be persistent in this climate, So because that's also one of the quality that you should demonstrate. I mean, as a leader or a future leader. So yeah, no matter how things are evolving and uncertainty that's surrounding like the US admissions ecosystem right now. So please don't give up, just continue all the procedures that you have already started. So the schools are really doing their best to support international students. We have really received really great support from the schools. I mean, navigating through all these procedures, especially because like in June, there was almost like a 1 month temporary closure of interviews, I guess. So you understand there are so uncertainties, but don't worry. I mean, as a prospective applicant, some of the schools are really doing their best to support all the applicants who are really looking forward to getting the US. Maybe what you have to do is just to kind of like things that you can do on your end is to minimize the risks, or maybe things that might prevent you to kind of like secure the visa. I think one of the things that emerged this year is social media screening. So be mindful of the posts that you're doing, that you're posting on any social media, because one of the things that like it's mandatory right now to disclose all your social media profiles to the embassy. So they are just requesting that you either fulfill it or you either kind of like lose the visa or maybe the visa kind of like get denied if you don't disclose all the social media. So that's maybe one of the things that, as an applicant right now, because most of the things are just beyond your reach. I mean, as an applicant, but the school can just support you throughout these hectic administrative procedures. But as an applicant, maybe things that you have under your control is just to manage your social media, things that are posting about the US governments, as well as like other Western governments. But maybe just what I would say is just to really have this positive attitude, be optimistic. So because yeah, there are uncertainties, but as a leader, you have to be persistent in process. Yeah.
Just one thing specifically to Knight-Hennessy program. I think one thing I've heard from recent scholars is, for example, in my time, you could apply to one degree program, say the MBA, and then when you get to campus, you decide I also want to take a second degree in policy, and they would guarantee funding for that. I think this year scholars were asked to apply. If you're thinking of doing a second program, you have to apply upfront so the school can know and budget for that. As opposed to, I think that option to be able to add a second degree while you're already at Stanford was not guaranteed this year. That was probably one of the impacts on the scholarship. And maybe, Gilles will tell us, maybe they've reduced the snacks at Denning House.
I will report. I will conduct my investigation and come back.
Yeah, and we did have, I think maybe something we did have like things like international trips. So you can, as scholars, you get to go to an international trip, lots of local. So maybe some of those things could have been affected if especially universities are now going to start paying taxes on their endowments. So it could just mean that, programs like those across all universities will probably start getting reduced.
Maybe another useful insightful information on the application process. I understand from the African perspective, we might not be used to paying application fee. I do remember, like as part of our graduate school application, you're supposed to pay a fee. Some departments actually waive that application fee. So you need to be mindful about the deadlines. Some of the departments have deadlines for applying application fee waiver, and those deadlines might be earlier than the regular deadlines. So you need to be mindful. So like all these graduate schools have program websites. So please check program websites and kind of like note down all those deadlines and arrange your application timeline accordingly, because this can be something really helpful on your end, just saving a couple of dollars, rather than just paying it at the end. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing those really useful tips. I would also encourage our audience, as you are, thinking about applying to Stanford or any other university abroad, to keep up with the new developments, especially since they seem these days to be changing quite a lot. So I think just keep updated with the current situation. And so to conclude this conversation that we were having today, I just want each of our panelists to give us a closing sort of reflection. And this is the question to reflect on. So if you had to speak directly to either, a student in Rwanda, Kenya, Haiti, who is planning to apply either this year or the next year, what is one piece of advice would you actually leave with them? So if you were speaking directly to that student who is considering applying to Stanford and Knight-Hennessy, what is that one piece of advice you would, if they were to forget anything else we said today, that thing, what should they keep in mind as they're putting together their application?
I can start with it. I think what I would tell someone is like you already have what it takes. I think reading I was reading the Hennessy has this interesting thing where they have the websites with all the scholars and what they've done. I remember when I was applying, I was reading through this and I was like, oh my God. the caliber of the people in that, it's insane. If you take a look, you're gonna see for yourself. But there are two ways it can make you feel. I think at times, most times, it made me feel excited because I was like, wow, like these are the people I'm gonna get. If I get in, I'm gonna be a part of that network, and I'm gonna, this is the caliber of people that they bring in. But at the same time, you can, like, I wouldn't say second guess yourself, but those people have done so much. And for me, like, it's not very rare. It's not common to have people straight out of undergrad. And typically people are coming in for the second, third, degree postgrad, or they've worked before. And that for me was the biggest thing, because you would see someone was like, oh yeah, I've worked, and it's pretty impressive, because I'm like, I'd love to have a chat with this person. But then if that's the caliber of people they accept, and I was a bit nervous about my chances. And so I think with these things, you can never be sure of getting in, because the margins are so, like, small. Like, it really is very hard. I went to immersion weekend, and I remember there were 200 immersion weekend. For people who don't know, it's that, like, this very last stage of the application process. They fly you to Stanford, you have a little nice hotel room, and then there's dining house, lots of food. That's how they convince the stragglers, because, as if you can't imagine, there are people who are still choosing. We were still choosing between Stanford and, I don't know, Yale and Harvard or whatever, especially for medical school and law school. So some of it is, that's some of the reason why they bring people there. But also just people get a sense of Stanford. It's beautiful. I was coming from cold New Jersey in February, and then I flew into Stanford, and I was like, oh my God, this place is stunning. So it was amazing to be there. But at the same time, everybody I met was just, like, incredible. Everyone. And there was like 180 of us, and I knew they were gonna take 100 max. And I remember feeling a bit intimidated. I was like, oh my, like, how am I gonna stand out from this? Like, there were founders, there are people, I'm like, why are you going back to school? You've raised like $500,000 already. Anyway, I think using these things as inspiration, I think channeling this energy and being like, starting to see yourself as part of that group, and not let yourself be beat down by it, and be like, I'm so excited that I'm even considered to be in this room, because that means people see me this way. So you got what it takes. Just focus on your application, lock in, because yeah, it's a great opportunity, and you shouldn't stop yourself from even trying. Yeah.
Gilles, either Eugene and Ghislain, again, we are answering the question, what's one piece of advice would you give to our audience to keep in mind as they are thinking about applying?
Just have a quick short message. Yeah, I believe everyone has a story to tell. So just utilize available tools to visualize your story. And yeah, be mindful about some logistical procedures, especially for scholarship like Knight-Hennessy. They have critical procedures. Just make sure that you have already gathered all enough information just to prepare the whole application process. Yeah, and yeah, keep fingers crossed and hope for the best. And but besides that, don't think that like beyond Knight-Hennessy, I mean, if you just get a rejection, that things are really ending on your end. Just be mindful about other opportunities available at Stanford or even other universities across the US or outside of the US. Just try to maximize chances available globally, and ensure that you have like multiple options like in March when the results are being announced. Yeah.
I think what I'd say is the application process to any good school or good program is very daunting. It's a long process, lots of requirements, entrance exams. At times, just studying for that when you have a job or business to run, it can be very difficult. But if you want something you've never had, then you have to do things you've never done. I remember a lot of Africans struggle with paying application fees. It's an investment. It costs, I probably paid $1,000 to apply to 3 schools, but I got $300,000 spent on me on a 2-year period by Knight-Hennessy. I've gone on 2 trips as an alumni of Knight-Hennessy program. It's a lot more than the fees that I pay. And you have to see it as an investment. And to the point on intimidation, yes. If all you do is go read the website, I remember applying to the MBA. There's this website called Poets and Quants, and when schools start rejecting people, there's this ding report. People go there and say, "I got rejected. I didn't get invited for an interview." And I remember in my time looking at a profile of this lady who served in the U.S. Army, started a company, raised venture funding. She was organizing marathons to fight. She was ticking every box, and she said, "I didn't even get an interview at a single school." And I thought, what the hell am I doing trying to apply, right? And I remember right before I submitted my application, one of my friends, one of my high school classmates, one of the smartest people I know, he was top student in Kenya, both high school and elementary school in the whole country, went to Stanford for undergrad, couldn't get accepted to any business school in the US. So it can be very intimidating if all you do is read. But when you talk to people, reach out to scholars, and you realize they're just people like you, right? So I think once you start speaking to people, then it becomes, okay, this guy just went to an African university like I did. If he could do it, then I can do it as well. But as you reach out to people and you ask for help from people, please also do your own homework. Like, for example, reading what's on the website, right? If you reach out to people on LinkedIn asking, hey, when does an Knight-Hennessy scholarship open up for applications? That information is on the website, and it just tells someone that you're lazy, so nobody's going to respond to you. But if you go do what you can do, read up what you can read up online, and then reach out with very specific questions. Hey, I'm working on my Knight-Hennessy video. I'm curious what kind of things expected of applicants. Then I know you've done your homework, and I'm happy to invest time to support you. So at least start from doing your own part.
Yes, so that concludes our conversation for today. Thank you so much for our panelists and all the wisdom that you have been able to give us. And I would echo everybody's advice, really. Take chances on yourselves. As you can see, even on the people on this panel, we all have different backgrounds. We all studied in different places. But here we are. As an example of myself, I was born in the western rural part of Rwanda called Nyabihu. Even up until this day, we actually are only starting to see some flickering of light. We still don't have electricity, no tap water, so we would go fetch water down there in the village. And so, but here I am, I'm at Oxford, so I think take chances on yourselves. Remember, as Ghislain said, everybody has a story to tell. And so it's really upon you to do your homework, to do your reflections, to find out how can I, as a person, align my story to what Stanford or Knight-Hennessy is looking for. And, apply, try this, try that. And I think for people who have unfortunately gone through, let's say, a process where they were rejected for one scholarship and not the other, it really is also giving you that experience, because as everybody was saying, it's very daunting. And so if you did it the first time, maybe the second time you might actually have a better chance because you've already seen, what it takes to actually put together an application, ask for recommendation letters. And so really don't give up and take your chances on yourselves and look out for the opportunities that the universe has in store for you. And so I would give the mic back to Rachel, who can say some final words and then dismiss us.
Thank you very much, Gloria, and I would like to send a special word of thanks to our panelists. This was one of the most insightful sessions that we really had. And I remember ever since last year when we were starting to have these kinds of sessions, even though most of the times talking about opportunities you find is the same information coming back, but there's always something unique about each and every platform get to run. And this session really was very insightful. And I believe everybody who was able to attend today's session is going to leave here not the way they came. So thank you very much, dear panelists. Thank you very much, Jill. Thank you very much, Eugene, Ghislain, and Fabrice, who was not able to make it. Sometimes when you're talking to people like this, you don't really see the impact, but we are a testament of that. We've had our own mentees who've been able to attend to these sessions, and they've really gained a lot from them. They have really secured admissions from different institutions across the globe. So this really, it's I don't know how to put it, but these 2 hours that we have spent on this platform can really change someone's life here. And to our viewers, or to the people who were able to tune into today's webinar, I would like to encourage you, as I think I could echo what Mr. Eugene said. We need to build the spirit of go-getters, because most of the times these hours you are applying as a global citizen, right? So if you're even just asking the basic questions, then how are you going to go about the application? So go to the website. Today we've learned about Knight-Hennessy, and I know to most of us, this was the first time hearing about Knight-Hennessy. But more than that, from the knowledge you've gained, from the insights you've gained, because everyone on this panelists, they're coming from, we have Kenyans, we have people from all the way Haiti. So hearing from them, hearing from the different experiences, you are able to apply on a higher ground. So go on the website of Knight-Hennessy, go on the website of Stanford, I don't know. When is the deadline? What are the requirements? Create an account, reach out. We've heard about recommendation, and we know, especially here in Rwanda, getting recommendations is really tough, because having that time to build that bond with the professors or your employers is really difficult. But starting early always makes a difference. And already there is someone who always tells us in the mentorship sessions is that if you apply, there is a 50% chance that you're going to make it. But if you don't, 100% you're not going to make it. So at the end of the day, let these hours, 2 hours you spend on this platform, let it be more of an investment for you. You go out there, apply. There's still some weeks left. Apply, do whatever that you can. Reach out to us for maybe insights. Our platforms are always open. Reach out and say, hey, I need my materials to be reviewed. How do I go about A, B, C, D? So that at the end of the day, our main goal is to see you achieve your academic dreams. So I can say a lot, but I think the biggest vote of thanks goes to the panelists. Thank you very much for taking that time, and the heart. I was really moved knowing that we are having the likes of Mr. Eugene. We're really humbled. This is something really big for us, having Mr. Gil on the platform, having our very own Ghislain. We've been working together for some time. It really means a lot. Having Gloria back again has been a while. And to the next gen community, I believe there is a lot to gain on this platform. We have some of our mentees, and when it comes to us, it's business. And I believe once this platform is, once this session is done, I believe you're going to also be applying to this kind of activity. So that's all from me. Thank you very much. In my local language, we say "Murakoze cyane," which is thank you very much. See you in the next adventure. Don't be strangers. Thank you very much.